The Holocaust, the state-sponsored persecution and murder of European Jews by Nazi Germany and its collaborators, is history's most extreme example of anti-Semitism. Hitler's rise and expansion. Promising to restore Germany to its former glory, the Nazi Party winning 18% of the vote. The Enabling Act, passed in March 1933, allowed the rape Germany during the period of Nazi control in 1933 and 1945. Government to issue laws without the consent of Germany's parliament, laying the foundation for the complete Nazification of German society. Its full name was the Law to Remedy the Distress of the People and the Rape. It essentially gave Hitler dictatorial power. Soon, 2000's anti-Jewish decrees became law. Hitler established a secret police, the Gestapo, who eliminated any opposition to the Nazi and rounded up Jews for relocation. Put an end to the communist threat and make Germany a powerful and proud nation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Once the Nazis were in power, anti-Semitism became public official government policy. Beliefs that Jews were a dangerous threat were spread throughout propaganda that pervaded daily life, radio, schools, police, military, and Hitler Youth training, and all forms of popular culture. The Nazis' abolition of freedom of speech and a free press ensured that Germans heard no voices advocating tolerance. The constant barrage of anti-Semitic propaganda had its intended effect. It contributed to a climate of indifference toward the persecution of Jews in Germany. Kristallnacht literally means night of crystal. It's often referred to as the night of broken glass because of the shards of shattered glass that line German streets from the windows of synagogues, homes, and Jewish-owned businesses plundered and destroyed during the violence. This wave of violence took place throughout Germany, annexed Austria, and in areas of Sudetenland, the German name for the northern, southern, and western areas of former Czechoslovakia, while 30,000 Jewish men were rounded up and sent to concentration camps. Significantly, Kristallnacht marks the first instance in which the Nazi regime incarcerated Jews on a massive scale, simply on the basis of their ethnicity. The violence was instigated primarily by the Nazi Party officials and members of the Storm Troops and the Hitler Youth. In the weeks that followed, the German government promulgated dozens of laws and decrees designed to deprive Jews of their property and means of livelihood. Many of these laws enforced Aryanization policy, the transfer of Jewish-owned enterprises and property to Aryan ownership, usually for a fraction of their true value. The events of Kristallnacht represent one of the most important turning points in the National Socialist anti-Semitic policy, because after the programmed anti-Jewish policy was concentrated more and more solely into the hands of the SS. Moreover, the passivity with which most German civilians responded to the violence signaled to the Nazi regime that the German public was prepared for more radical measures. Thus, Kristallnacht figures as an essential turning point in Nazi Germany's persecution of Jews, which culminated in the attempt to annihilate the European Jews.
The term final solution of the Jewish question was a euphemism used by Nazi Germany's leaders. It referred to the mass murder of Europe's Jews. It brought an end to policies aimed at encouraging or forcing Jews to leave the German Reich and other parts of Europe. Those policies were replaced by systematic annihilation. First, it is unclear when Hitler decided to murder Europe's Jews. The decision was probably made sometime in 1941 with the invasion of the Soviet Union. Second, on January 20th, 1942, Reinhard Heydrich, the chief of Germany's security police, held a secret meeting known as the Wannsee Conference. Leading police and civilian officials discussed the continuing implementation of the final solution. Third, the Nazi leaders envisioned killing 11 million Jews as part of the final solution. They succeeded in murdering 6 million. The Nazi final solution to the Jewish question was the deliberate and systematic mass murder of European Jews. It was the last stage of the Holocaust and took place from 1941 to 1945. Though many Jews were killed before the final solution, The vast majority of Jewish victims were murdered during this period. The final solution was the culmination of a decade of increasingly severe, discriminatory, anti-Jewish measures implemented by the Nazis. Today, the final solution is used as a synonym for the genocide of Europe's Jews. The death marches. Near the end of the war, when Germany's military force was collapsing, the Allied armies closed in on the Nazi concentration camps. The Soviets approached from the east, and the British, French, and Americans from the west. The Germans began frantically to move the prisoners out of the camps near the front and take them to be used as forced laborers in camps inside Germany. Prisoners were first taken by train and then by foot on what became known as death marches. Prisoners were forced to march long distances in bitter cold with little or no food, water, or rest. Those who could not keep up were shot. The largest death marches took place in the winter of 1944-45, when the Soviet army began its liberation of Poland. 9 days before the Soviets arrived at Auschwitz, the Germans marched tens of thousands of prisoners out of the camp toward Władysław, a town 35 miles away, where they were put on freight trains to other camps. About 1 in 4 died on the way. Evacuation of nearly 50,000 prisoners began January 25, 1945, from the Stutthof camp system in northern Poland. About 5,000 prisoners from Stutthof subcamps are marched to the Baltic Sea coast, forced into the water, and machine gunned. There were many other death marches, 59 in total, which took place in January 1945, and were plagued by cold winter weather, starvation, and brutalization. Although a small number of prisoners escaped during the marches, 250,000 people died because of them.
In western Belarusia, western Ukraine, and eastern Poland, family camps were established in which Jewish civilians repaired weapons, made clothing, cooked for the fighters, and assisted Soviet partisan operations. As many as 10,000 Jews survived the war by taking refuge with Jewish partisan units. The camp established in the Malaboki forest in 1942 gave refuge to more than 1,200 Jews. Jewish prisoners rebelled against their guards at the Treblinka, Sobibor, and Auschwitz-Birkenau death camps in 1943 and 1943 and 44. General Dwight D. Eisenhower, in the letter to Chief of Staff George C. Marshall on April 15, 1945, said, "The things I saw begged description. The visual evidence and the verbal testimony of starvation, cruelty, and bestiality were overpowering. I made the visit deliberately in order to be in a position to give first-hand evidence of these things, if ever in the future there develops a tendency to charge these allegations merely to propaganda." Soviet forces were the first to overrun a major Nazi concentration camp, Lublin-Majdanek, near Lublin, Poland, in July of 1944. On January 27, 1945, Soviet troops liberated the Auschwitz concentration camp, where they discovered more than 6,000 prisoners, including young children who had not been evacuated by the SS. American soldiers witnessed evidence of the Holocaust and Nazi atrocities as they marched into the interior of Germany, liberating the major concentration camps of Buchenwald, Dachau, and Mauthausen, as well as hundreds of subcamps. British forces liberated camps in northern Germany, including Neuengamme and Bergen-Belsen. Liberators confronted unspeakable conditions in the Nazi camps, where piles of corpses lay unburied. Only after the liberation of these camps was the full scope of the Nazi horrors exposed to the world. The small percentage of inmates who survived resembled skeletons because of the demands of forced labor and lack of food and years of maltreatment. Many were so weak that they could hardly move. Disease remained an ever-present danger, and many of the camps had to be burned down to prevent the spread of epidemics. Survivors of the camps faced a long and difficult road to recovery.
After the war, the top surviving German leaders were trying for Nazi Germany's crimes, including the crimes The trial was held before an international military tribunal in Nuremberg, Germany. Judges from the Allied powers of Great Britain, France, Soviet Union, and the United States presided over 22 major Nazi criminals. Subsequently, the United States held 12 additional trials in Nuremberg of high-level officials of the German government, military, and SS, as well as medical professionals and leading industrialists. The crimes charged before the Nuremberg courts were war crimes, crimes against humanity, and conspiracy to commit any of the foregoing crimes. In all, 199 defendants were tried at Nuremberg. 161 were convicted, and 37 sentenced to death. Holocaust crimes were included in a few of the trials, but they were the major focus of only the U.S. trials of the mobile killing squad leaders. The defendants generally acknowledged that the crimes that they were accused of did in fact occur, but they denied responsibility based on they were just following orders. I'm going to digress. The Nazis' highest authority, the person most to blame for the Holocaust, was missing at the trials. Adolf Hitler had committed suicide in the final day of the war with several of his closest aides. The majority of the last war crime trials involved lower-level officials and officers. Among them were concentration camp guards, commandants, police officers, and members of the mobile killing squads, and doctors who participated in atrocious medical experiments. The war crime trials were tried by military courts in the British, American, French, and Soviet zones of occupied Germany, as well as in Australia and Italy. Much of our early knowledge of the German concentration camp system came as the evidence in eyewitness testimonies at some of these trials. So, there is, even after something as terrible as the Holocaust, an opportunity to start over. Let's just talk about that for just a moment. For the survivors who were liberated from the concentration camps, the prospect of rebuilding their lives was daunting. Most were unable or unwilling to return to Eastern Europe because of anti-Semitism and the destruction of their communities during the Holocaust. Those who did return often feared for their lives. Many Holocaust survivors migrated westward to territories liberated by the Allies, where they were housed in displaced persons camps and refugee centers while waiting to leave Europe. From 1945 to 1952, more than 250,000 Jewish displaced persons lived in camps and urban centers in Germany, Austria, and Italy. These facilities were administered by Allied authorities and the United Nations Relief Rehabilitation Administration, also known as UNRWA. Soon after liberation, the survivors began searching for their families. UNRWA established the Central Tracing Bureau to help survivors locate relatives who had survived the concentration camps. Public radio broadcasts and newspapers contained the list of survivors and their whereabouts. The attempt to reunite families went hand in hand with the creation of new families by virtue of many weddings and many births that took place in the dispersed camps. Schools were soon established, and Orthodox Judaism began its rebirth as religious schools, yeshiva, and were founded in several camps. Religious holidays began became major occasions for gatherings and celebrations. Jewish volunteer agencies supplied religious articles for everyday and holiday use and worked to assist the Jewish displaced persons. So, out of despair rather, there is hope. It's essential to know the history of the horrors and atrocities and despair, to learn from it and never again let it become a reality. We must also not forget the kindness and actions of those who maintained their humanity and acted to help others. So there is hope if we all show kindness and help others at every opportunity. So that concludes Station 5, and for most of you, I think it will mean that you rotate over to Station 1 and get filled in.